Good morning. Today is July 19th, 2014, and here we are in the recording booth with LuJeanne Christensen Ogden, my mother. I'm Katie Ogden Beecher. With us we have my husband Bob and also cousin Brad Ogden to help us have a little conversation here that we can record some history. So, let's see, Mom, I think we'd like to go back a little ways and talk about your parents, maybe even your grandparents and dads. So, what can you tell us about Grandma Bonnie and Grandpa Leonard when they grew up?
Well, Grandma Bonnie grew up in Pleasant Grove, and Dad Leonard grew up in Richfield. And I don't really know about their growing up because I wasn't there. I know after they got married and I got acquainted with them.
How did they meet?
Mom came down to Central for a funeral, and I can't remember who the funeral was for, but Dad's cousin LaRue Ogden was there, and he was married to Letitia Gray, who was a cousin of Mom's, and that's how she met Dad at that funeral. And I think they corresponded because she went back to Pleasant Grove. She was working for Utah Power and Light, demonstrating electric stoves. And she went around in the different towns and demonstrated. In her youth, her mother and dad lived in Pleasant Grove. Alexander Wardrop Gray and Leslie Adelaide Stewart. And I lost my train of thought.
Well, I was going to ask, what year were they married?
Well, that's
Roughly.
a good question.
1915.
1915.
November 24th, I think.
So these electric ranges had to be brand new technology.
Yeah. But her mother and her father and mother were cooks, and they went out with surveying teams, mostly when they were building the power plants. They went up to Grace, Idaho, and to different areas where the power plants were being built, and Pop was the main cook, and Bonnie helped, and Mom and Lloyd, Uncle Lloyd, were there to be the runners and gophers. But they spent a lot of summers camping out while he cooked. Even after, I remember Pop, when I was a little kid, went up into Salina Canyon for some project and cooked for a team up there. And I don't know how old he'd be, but we could figure it out, I guess.
Yeah.
Old he
How many
was.
children were in that family?
There's Mom and her brother Lloyd and a sister Virginia Addie.
So 3
And
children.
Virginia Addie was, I think, quite a bit younger than Mom. But they were married on the same day in the Salt Lake Temple. And I think, as I recall the story, that Bonnie insisted that Virgie get married at the same time. She her married and off her hands, I think. I don't know when Lloyd got married. Then after they married, Dad had bought a home in Richfield across from his dad. Just a little 3-room adobe house.
What street was that on?
245 South, First West.
Is that the house that they were living in where Grandpa had his garden?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They added on to it, but that was it.
Okay.
So he bought the house at that time.
When he was growing up, he was the main helper for Grandpa Hantz's farming. He was in the second family.
So Grandpa Hans is
Hans Christensen.
Hans Christensen. Okay.
And he had two wives,
Mm-hmm.
Johanna Marie and Johanna Catherine. And Johanna Catherine was our grandmother. And she came from Denmark. And Grandpa Hans came from Denmark when he was just a real young man, maybe in his teens, I don't know. He joined the church, he and his brother joined the church in Denmark. Their family didn't have anything to do with them after that. Well, actually, when they went back on missions, they would be sociable if they didn't talk about the church.
Grandpa Hans and Grandpa Leonard went back to Denmark on missions.
Grandpa Leonard served a mission also.
And I don't know how many of his grandsons have served missions in Denmark. They haven't made any headway at all with people over there. And what next?
So your father was from the second wife, Johanna Catherine. The first one was Johanna Marie.
Did you ever know her?
No, she died before I was born. And Grandpa Hans died before I was born. So I don't remember them. When I grew up, Aunt Hannah's, who was in the first family, her son LaRue lived in that home across the road. In the old, and then later they built a new home there.
Across from Grandpa Leonard's house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't remember a house that was over there.
It was on the corner, walked straight across.
LaRue was the county surveyor, I think.
He was an engineer.
An engineer. He was given the assignment of deciding whether Greenwich was in Paiute County or Sevier County. We had a big argument over that.
What did he decide?
Sevier County got it. Which, the property tax revenues were rather important.
Okay.
Well, when we grew up in Richfield, it was a really fun area to live in. We had chores to do. In the summertime, we took the cows to the pasture in the morning after their milk, and then in the evening we went back and got them and brought them home.
How old were you when you did that? Started doing it?
I don't know how old I was.
8?
Maybe, I don't know.
So the cows were kept at home. They were milk cows primarily.
Milk cows, we had 4 milk cows. They were kept in the corral back of the house, but they went to the pasture all during the day. We had to, and the pasture was down past Gooseley Lane, the next lane down, and across the street from where the radio station is now,
Okay.
where our pasture was.
Sort of the east side of town.
Mm-hmm. And we didn't have, I always thought it was at least a mile, but I'm not sure. Was that far
What did
enough?
you do when you got them to the pasture? Just
Then we turned around and come home and got ready to go to the swimming pool. Go swimming. Well, I was after all the work was done. And the beets were on. We had to go to the field and thin beets and wheat beets. And then we had to pick up potatoes. And mostly I remember thinning beets and weeding the beets. That was what mostly did.
it's easy to remember because it was no fun.
No, but Mom would pack a big lunch, great big lunch, and there was a tree out there. So the tree and have our lunch, and there was always just a few Indians that helped us with the thinning. And I think that all through the years, all of Dad's nephews helped out on the farm. I think that Dad had his property. They all had a piece of property that had been his dad's that one of the boys had. I don't know which one it was, that he farmed for him.
So this is originally the Hans Christensen piece, and then his sons, including your father, all had
You know,
pieces of that.
I can't remember how Dad got his property. I don't think I ever heard that story. But
So-
I know he farmed his and what was left of Hans's.
Did he feel like he was as much a part of the family as anybody else, being from the second wife? Was there any
They were
difference?
second-class citizens.
They felt that way, huh?
Oh, yeah. And when you had a big family get-together, or a funeral, or a wedding, you weren't sure that you were included. But they were always good to us because we lived right in the neighborhood where they all lived.
Uh-huh.
But there was still that feeling.
That sense of being not quite part of the group.
No, you weren't sure.
So from what you remember, how did they talk about the two wives? Did the two wives get along all right? Was there any kind of...
They're all gone when I come.
I know, but
I didn't-
sometimes they talk around the kitchen table and you don't remember anything.
In fact, I don't remember them talking about my grandmother. I don't know anything about her dad's mother at all.
In her obituary, it said she was a real quiet,
That's
reserved
probably why I didn't hear anything about her.
person, and maybe it's because she felt the same way, kind of.
After I married Jerry, and Josh and Bess had come up for dinner when Dad and Mom were there, they would talk about when they were kids. And the two mothers used to get together to have a little cup of tea in the afternoon or wherever they had it. But they neighbored, because they were, I guess, across the street from each other.
So that seemed to be kind of a bond maybe that second wives would have sometimes.
Well, this is my grandmother and Jerry's grandmother,
And Jerry's grandmother,
Ogden.
Hannah Ogden,
Was also a second
was
wife.
also a second wife.
So
So
they probably did have some things in common.
yeah, you'd think that.
What were some of the games that you played when you were growing up? You said that
Night
you went
games.
swimming.
We had night games where we played Run Sheepy Run and Red Rover, and Kick the Can. And I can't remember any of the others, but we had sometimes built a fire out in the side of the road and put potatoes in them, and roast potatoes at night.
What about indoor games? Did you have any indoor games you played?
We had that wood table thing, I can't remember what we call it, had checkers on it that had a little thing you'd shoot with a stick. I don't know. As a family, we didn't really play a lot of games.
What about your friends? Who were your closest friends growing up?
I had 4 really close friends all through the years. Alton Nielsen lived across the road. Margaret Hood lived down in the first ward. And Betty Ward lived a couple blocks up the street. And we were a foursome for years and years and years. I went to Fish Lake in the Beehives for our camping in the summer. Betty's dad, Alfred Ward, was the maintenance man at the grade school or junior high, I don't know which. He had a truck, he'd take us up.
To Fish Lake?
And we'd stay 2 weeks.
Well, that's about a day trip to get up there before they built the new road, wasn't it?
Well, the new road was built then.
Okay.
Well, we went over the Dugway. I can't remember where that Dugway was, but it was scary.
Well,
And
tell
Mom
us.
and Dad used to take us, the family, up to Fish Lake and camp, but not very often, maybe once a year. And they had a big crowd of friends that they went around with,
Did they?
hung out with.
Tell us about your siblings.
Well, you know, I don't remember a lot about Boyd because he was older and,
How much older?
7 years.
Born in 1916, I think.
Virgie was 4 years older, and I remember that they were both really good students, and Boyd was always good to us. He didn't tease us a lot like that or anything. But
I noticed from the census that Boyd and his wife lived with you in your house there for a short time, maybe about 1940 or something. Lists the two of them there in the household.
I don't remember that. Well, that's because I was back in Washington in 1940,
Oh, I see. Okay.
not 40, 41.
How many years were you back there?
Not quite 5 years. If you were there for 5 years, then you couldn't get your retirement out. But if it was less than 5 years, you could get everything you put into retirement out. Of course, I needed that money more then than I would need it now.
Well, back up for a second. So, how old were you when you went? You went to work for the government, right?
When I was
Just out of high school?
When I was in high school, they gave us a civil service test. And that summer, I worked for Alton and Alta, cleaning their house and tending the baby. Then in the fall, I went up to register at BYU, and while I was getting registered, the government called and said they had a job for me in Washington. So Dad called, and he didn't squeeze my arm or anything, but he was sure glad when I decided to go.
And why do you think he wanted you to go?
For the money.
Oh.
She became a producer of income rather than a consumer.
You didn't have to pay your tuition.
And,
So this was about 1940.
was it 40?
Well, you
I was trying to
40, 41.
remember if I graduated in 40 or 41.
But the war really hadn't,
No, Pearl
We hadn't
Harbor
entered the
was
war.
after I got back to
Yeah.
Washington.
you weren't part of the war effort necessarily. You
Yeah,
were
I was
just-
working for a war production board.
Oh, were you? Okay.
In fact, we were working on Pearl Harbor Day. And
When
we
that
were in the
happened?
office working and didn't know anything about it till we came out at 5 o'clock that night.
How did you feel when you heard that news?
Kind of like a disaster, you know.
Awful news.
But the war didn't affect me like it would if I'd been in Richfield, because I wasn't personally acquainted with any of the people that were fighting or that had to go to war. I wasn't around when they were drafted and had to go. I didn't hear about them till I read the letter or Reaper or something.
So you spent 4 years back there, is that what you said?
Almost 5.
Almost 5. Was the war about over then when you had it ended?
We had VE Day and VJ Day. I was back there during that.
And didn't you say that Dad was back in that same area when you were back?
He was in Quantico with the Marines during that time, but I didn't know it.
And where is Quantico?
It's in Maryland, or
Okay.
Virginia.
And you were in Washington.
Mhm.
So you went back to Washington, just a girl out of high school from Richfield, Utah. Did you have anybody that went with you?
No.
So you didn't know anybody?
Well, my sister Virgie was back there.
She was already back there.
But as soon as I got there, she left. In fact, she told me not to come. Because she
Why?
was leaving.
She wasn't that happy with it, huh?
No, didn't think it was that
Was she
bad.
working for the War Board also?
I don't know
Or
what she worked
some
for.
other agency?
She had been out there maybe a year or two. I can't remember who she worked for. I don't remember.
So your work at the time was probably classified, but you could talk about it now, right?
No, it wasn't. It was, we were working for a railroad division, and all we were trying to do was get trains running and keep the trains going.
Were there other Richfield people that eventually came back there, or did you have?
The only ones I really remember seeing was Gwen and Marilyn White, Polson White.
Uh-huh.
They were Eugene Polson's daughters. They were in my ward at home. They were back there at that same time. There might have been others, I don't know.
I think that's Russell's mother, isn't it? Marilyn White?
Mhm.
Paul
And
White's
Elaine?
wife?
Elaine, did she belong to them?
Elaine,
Elaine White that I went to school with?
well, that's probably Marilyn's daughter.
So you get back there, you have to find your own housing arrangements. Of course, your sister was there.
Well, yeah, but there wasn't room in her apartment because they already had 4 girls in it, and so there was a boarding house just across the bridge, and I moved into that boarding house and met this girl from McKeesport, Pennsylvania. I lived with her, Marjorie Farinack, and we lived together all the time I was back there.
Did you?
As soon as Virgie left the apartment, then we moved over in it. Lived on 2701 Connecticut Avenue. And while we were there was a big scandal because they were having that apartment in the main floor was being used for a call house for prostitutes. So if I gave my address to the taxi driver, oh, do you live in that apartment?
During that 4-year time, did you ever come back to Utah for a visit?
A couple of times.
Couple of times. And you do that by train?
By train. 3 days and 2 nights.
Wow. So,
And when I got on the train to go to Washington, Dad says, now just be careful and don't talk to anybody unless they have a uniform on.
like they'd be safer, huh?
Interesting.
So Aunt Virgie, from there, did she go to San Francisco?
Mm-hmm.
And then Aunt Vanna joined her in San Francisco?
Mm-hmm. When she got out of high school, she and Dorothy went down to.
Vonna and Dorothy were close, and
Oh.
they went to San Francisco. It seemed like
Okay.
people were anxious to get
Out of town,
out of town to the city where there things were happening. There was excitement.
where you could earn some money and get a job.
Dance with those handsome servicemen. So did you attend church during those 4 years back there?
Off and on. They had a really lovely chapel back there, and if you went to church, you'd almost always see somebody you knew or knew of. But I didn't go every Sunday. In fact, we worked some Sundays. But it wasn't the main thing.
What did you do with the money that you earned?
I saved it, bought war bonds. After 5 years, when I got home, I had $900 in the bank. It's a big deal.
Well, it would have bought more than it does today, I'm sure.
Well, when I went back there, my salary was $22.40 a year.
$2,240 a year.
But we lived on it. We had a nice apartment. We did the things we wanted to do. We had all the food we wanted to eat.
Did you travel to New York or?
Yeah, we went to New York. Virgie and Marge and I got on the train and went up to New York. We traveled to Pennsylvania quite often, down to one of the girls I lived with was from McKeesport, and one was from Carnegie. And when we first started going down for a weekend, we'd go on the train, but it was, the time we'd get there would be just so dirty and black. It was, I finally talked him into flying one trip. Pearl and I flew down to see her folks. And I said, let's sit back here where we can see. And of course I got sick. She had a wonderful trip.
So 4 years draws to a close, the war ends, and you decide to return to Richfield.
Yeah, Fawn and I were going to go somewhere exotic and find work and really live it up. And we standing in the bank doing some business, and Royal Kimball asked me if I'd come to work for him. I said, sure. And Fauna hit me.
That's not what I had in mind for exotic. Royal Kimball, what business was his?
He was cashier at the bank,
Oh, what bank?
Richfield Commercial and Savings Bank.
It's probably the only one that,
Well, they had the Peterson Bank and the State Bank.
That's
There were
right.
3 banks in town.
What was the population of Richfield?
As far as I could remember, it was always around 5,000 until I think it's almost up to 7,000
it was
now.
5,000 when I graduated.
That's all I remember, that figure, 5,000.
So you went to work in the bank as a cashier.
I wasn't a cashier.
Or
I
no,
was
no,
a-
cashier, not a cashier, but
a secretary, stenographer.
how long did you stay there?
We worked there that summer and winter. I think it was that, let's see, I was probably in 46. It was that next spring that Vonna got married, and then I got married that December.
So where did you first meet Jerry?
Janet introduced us, invited me to go on a picnic with him over to Monroe Canyon. She and Kay were married, and Janet and Vonna and I had hung out together.
Janet's a couple of years younger than you are.
Janet's quite a few years younger.
Right.
She's younger than Vonna. Vonna was 2 years. She was probably 5 or 6 years younger, maybe.
Dad was born in 27, I would guess, maybe. So they're trying to get Jerry married. Well, that was, I didn't know that. You went on a picnic and then things just went on from there?
Yeah, we hung around that summer. Vonna and AJ got married. I was trying to think, it was the dance in Elsinore, but I don't know if it's the Deer Hunters dance or another one. And then they went to Las Vegas and eloped.
Oh, they did.
And then that December, Jerry and I got married.
What were some of the things you did when you were dating? Seems like
Go
there
to
was...
Chesty's. Go to Chesty's and have a cup of coffee or a Coke.
That was a restaurant?
Chesty's, it was a hamburger joint.
Okay.
It's right there where Christensen's is now.
Oh, we're Christian, okay.
It was a hanging out place.
I remember there was that dance place up above Glenwood on the road to Fish Lake.
There was the Anona was one dance place, and Shady Dell was down by Marysville, I think.
Redmondo. I can't remember where that was. We'd go to Fish Lake, or we'd go, Jerry had friends he hung out with. Marion and Everett Polson, and who else was there? Jim Gardner and his wife. Phoebe and Carpace.
Okay, so you get married, and Phoebe and Gar Pace, were they into the Coca-Cola business at that time?
And Gar was a truck driver for Coke. And Phoebe's family had that clothing store on Main Street,
In Richfield?
Richville Clothing.
Richfield Clothing. She's a
Oh.
Pace, right?
Yeah.
I knew her well in Price. She was
Yeah.
interesting.
So then he got hired in Price, and they went to Price?
When they had the opportunity to buy the business, they also had the opportunity to buy Price and Cedar and Payson. And the same family owned all those businesses, all those. And so Jerry called Kay, and he came down and bought the one in Cedar, and Gar bought the one in Price, and Boyd and Bert and Jerry took Richfield. And one of the other workers took Payson, but he was one of the Payson workers. Can't remember his name.
But at least you three with Richfield ties all stayed pretty close.
Yeah.
So did Dad know, or how did Dad know Bert Salisbury and Boyd Christensen?
They were all working at the plant for this Staten. That's the name of the fellow that owned it. And he lived down in South America, had businesses all around the world. But he gave them a chance to buy it, and they had to each put up $5,000.
Where did Jerry get his 5,000?
We had to mortgage the house.
Your 900 was long gone, probably.
Well, he had that much too that he had
Did he?
saved to put in to buy that barracks.
The barracks that was part of the VA bill or something, where you could
I
take a
don't know.
piece of the barracks home and make a house out of it?
They put those barracks up for sale, and you could get them almost for the price of moving them to town, as
Wow.
I remember it. I don't know if they were free or you just had to pay to move them down.
Probably pay to move them. When I drove around town the other day and started looking at these houses, I realized how many there were
There were a lot.
in town, a lot of them.
A lot of the veterans took advantage of that.
Sort of modified in different ways, but you could all see that they were originally barracks homes.
North Salisbury got one. Gene Mendenhall's.
Max Franson up the street, I'm sure that's one.
I don't remember that one.
Just kind of a simple box style that they had done things with.
So,
Gets in the plant, but the three of those, Jerry and Bert and Boyd, were classmates too, weren't they?
Oh, no.
They weren't?
Bert was a lot older than.
But Boyd and Jerry were in the same class, I believe. I saw their
They might
yearbook.
have been the same age, I don't remember.
And Jerry was working for Coke in high school too.
Yes,
Yeah, all right.
and when he first came from the service, he worked over in Price, or helper, for he and Molly Christensen for, I don't know how long, till they got it established, and then they came back to Richfield. And he moved from the truck into the office.
So he was the office guy of the three partners. Bert was the
Bottler,
bottler, and Boyd swept the floors?
Boyd trucked.
Boyd trucked.
His route was up to Manti, up that area. Then when Fred got big enough to take the truck, then he started sweeping.
And you eventually then left the bank and went to work?
As soon as I stayed there after we married, till I got pregnant, then I said that was the end of that. As soon as I could show that I was pregnant, they found somebody else.
So you stayed home and Katie was born? Life changed?
We lived down with, we had 3 different apartments, but the time she was a baby, we moved in with Josh and Bess, because Bess was over in Helper, in Twilla, taking care of Helen.
Oh.
And so that winter, maybe 3 or 4 months, we stayed there with Josh while Jerry was working on our house.
were any of the kids home at that time?
No. Courtney was probably at Logan, I don't know. Janet was married and lived up in Soda Springs.
Is that where Kay was from?
Grace,
Grace, Idaho.
Grace, Idaho, that's where it was.
How did they meet?
At college, up to Utah State.
So as the years went on, I was interested in the Coca-Cola bottling company plant that you had. Everything ran smoothly for all those years? Were there times that were really trying, or did it slowly build and grow?
There was animosity all the time.
Oh, there was.
Bert and Boyd almost come to blows.
And Jerry had to be the mediator.
Yeah.
But he held it together.
They held it together. They didn't actually associate too much together,
The three of them.
any of them. They worked together.
Well, the business seemed to be a good business all through the years.
It was.
Well, it had to be to support three owners like that. Those smaller businesses, that's a lot of ownership.
And when we sold, it was at a really good time. When Jerry found out he had cancer, that's the first thing he wanted to do was sell, get out of the business. But Ramsey kicked up a big sting. He says, no, don't sell the plant, don't sell the plant. So we hung on to it, which was the best thing we ever did. So that I think we were having a hard time after Jerry died. Needed new trucks and coolers. It was.
So did you step in then and sort of?
I did the books for about 4 years, accounts receivable and paychecks. And Fred managed. Fred took over managing. But when we got a chance to sell it, it was the best thing that happened because this company wanted all the plants in Utah.
That was Squires.
And they would pay so much per capita what your consumption was. And it was a good price, and our consumption was good. So we lucked out.
And you worked for the BLM, right?
I quit working there when Jerry got sick. I worked up there for a few years.
It was sort of a family business too, because I remember reading in the history where Katie and Elizabeth would deliver invoices around town.
No, they didn't do that. We mailed
Liz said
Did
she
you
remembers.
put that in your history?
I don't remember delivering invoices, but I worked in the office at the Coke plant.
Yeah.
I did accounts payable and receivable for a few summers, and
When you were in high school?
yeah, that drove Dad crazy, probably, trying to,
Yeah.
but he was really good at finding my mistakes. He could find them pretty quick, usually.
There was a great routine to the Coke plant down there. I mean, he would be in his office, in the mornings, door shut, adding, trying to reconcile the prior day probably. 10 o'clock, he'd go get the donuts.
Go to the bank,
Go to the bank.
visit
your mom
Grandma.
and dad.
Visit Grandma and Grandpa, right?
Yeah.
After lunch, he'd take a 20-minute nap, come home for lunch. So yeah, he had a good routine.
I like the donuts best.
Well, when did you work down there?
When I was in high school, so that would have been 70 through 72. I was pulling weeds one day when they said, Uncle Jerry's on the phone, wants to talk to you. So I got to go load trucks,
Build muscles.
build muscles. But the problem was the other three guys were the biggest hoods in town. They're the only ones that would do that. So, and I was just a scrawny little kid. They'd offer me a smoke, and I didn't.
See, Ramsey was put in that same situation.
Was he?
Yeah.
It eventually changed a little bit, but they were the toughs. That's why I turned out like I did. But it was a great experience to work there and make some money. It wasn't easy work, but appreciated Uncle Jerry, and we must have driven him crazier than you ever could.
He was very even-tempered.
He was.
He didn't get upset a lot. He just took everything as it came and came in the home happy.
He left it at the office if he was frustrated?
I think he liked to go to work.
He was a peacemaker, and that was his personality.
He was a middle child in the family. Maybe that was his role. He certainly had some older brothers that had to be forced into some peaceful attitudes.
I think that Dick gave him more trouble than anybody.
I think it wouldn't be any surprise to Dick's family to know that he was mean. he just seemed to have a chip on his shoulder and something to prove when he was younger. Go to the dances and get in fights. So during those years you went, they were good years.
Well,
Kids came
those
along.
first few years there was a few problems because Jerry was drinking until I think he didn't ever get mean. He just got sleepy, and then he'd have to get up early in the morning, go down and fix the mistakes he'd made the night before.
Mm.
And Bill Street introduced him to AA, and he joined AA, and I think around Mother's Day, I think Jerry Lou was born, wasn't she? You don't remember?
I don't remember.
I think Jerry Lou was a baby because I remember I met some folks at AA that had daughters that would come and attend so we could go to meeting. And he was very active in AA for all through the years.
Changed his life, didn't it?
And I don't remember that at all.
That was Bill Street, and his son lives next door to you now?
Yeah. And
Yeah. And I'm sure Jerry helped many other people through the years, through his activity with that.
he did. We went to meeting every Thursday night for years.
You went together?
Called what they called Al-Anon would meet separately. But we'd go and have coffee and donuts after.
And when Dad, before he died, got his 25-year pin, I think.
Sobriety.
So,
It's a blessing.
yeah, great. Little things happen that sometimes turn lives in completely different directions, and that was a real positive thing.
One of the things that he never could give up is smoking. Jerry, Katie always gave him a bad time wanting to quit smoking. Never could give it up.
I went to church with him a few times. Maybe it was before we actually moved to Ridgefield, but he was really trying. I think he would have liked to.
Well, he didn't feel comfortable there when he was smoking, and that was the whole thing.
I think it was the same with my brother, with my dad.
If there was a baby blessing or something like that, he would go. But he gave me a set of scriptures one year for Christmas with my name on it. That really surprised me.
So you didn't have to make any drastic changes, but you became more and more active in the church. Did it happen all at once, or?
Well, it was, I don't even remember when it was. I just woke up in the night thinking, you've got to get back to church. And I just made up my mind that I'd become more active. And I think that was, I don't know if I think it was after Jerry died, wasn't it?
I think so.
I probably needed something in my life that time.
Was that difficult?
The hardest part was trying to give up the coffee, because that's where my social life was.
That's right.
The neighborhood ladies meet every day. visit.
How did you have time to do that? I can't imagine.
You make time for what you want. About 9 o'clock in the morning, we'd start gathering and only be there for 45 minutes, an hour, and then we'd go back to work.
Did you gather at any one place?
Well, we went to all of our times.
Sort of rotated around?
Yeah.
So you and Helen Scott next door and Jean Nazer.
And
And there-
Utana Hanson and Anna Q lived over in the apartments, Jack Anderson apartment.
Vera Salisbury.
And Vera was just down the block a ways.
Seems like life in Richfield, and it might still be that way, it's built on routine. You know, you talk about Jerry's routine, and you had your coffee club things, bridge every second Thursday or something. It's just an order to things. You could count on it happening.
Well, lots of those ladies in your coffee club quit drinking coffee, didn't they? And you started drinking hot water.
That's true. I started that.
Didn't some of them come along with you?
Yeah, Vera gave it up. Helen and Jean both died, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you were in what ward?
We were in several wards. When we first got married, we were in the 2nd ward. And then they built that 7th ward church, and we were in the 7th ward. And we met for a time down in the Tabernacle. I can't remember now what ward we were. Maybe the 7th ward was meeting down there while they built their building.
When you were younger, was there a difference in the wards? Was one ward perceived as more elite, or
Well, the one you were in was probably the most elite.
probably? But it seemed like they carved the town up, and the merchants or the people with more money seemed to be in one ward, and the farmers were in another ward. It was
They made the dividing line down our lane from the 1st ward into the 4th ward when we were kids.
oh.
And so we were in that 4th ward when it was organized.
Do you remember the old tabernacle?
No. Mm-mm.
Not at all. So you went, you started drinking hot water, eventually went on a mission. Where was your first mission?
I went to Columbus, Ohio. That was 83, I think. 1983.
Proselyting mission?
Yes. Of course, when I signed up, I didn't realize I would be proselyting because there had been an article in the Ensign that there were a lot of different types of missions you could go to. When I got back to Columbus, I found out I was proselyting.
So after it was over in Ohio, how do you remember that? Was it a great experience?
It was. It was challenging. I drove back there, and I had my car, and I'd have to drive the elders around, and they wouldn't let the elders drive my car. I had to drive them down into Columbus, different areas, and it was really inspirational to be with all those elders, especially at zone meeting. There weren't so many sisters. There were maybe 20 sisters in our mission. I was the only senior sister. They really didn't know what to do with me because at the MTC they told us we didn't have to memorize everything. But the little girl that trained me thought, you should memorize everything. So I memorized a lot, and next week I'd memorize it again.
So you came home and then later served the second mission in California.
I was home for about a year, and I think I felt like I hadn't done what I need to do yet. And so I decided to go again. And California wasn't near as challenging. The weather was better. Well, it was hotter. Met some really nice people. And we had got an opportunity to teach a lot. And I had some really fun companions. In California, several of them spoke Spanish, and we taught a lot of Spanish lessons, or they did.
Did you no, you didn't always have young companions. I remember at least
No,
one
and,
older companion.
In Ohio, they were all young, but when I got to California, I had some senior sisters. And two that I remember. They were sweet sisters.
Good service. So I think we only have like 5 minutes left. Maybe you should just, we have 9?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what would you like to say
I'd
that
like
you
to
haven't
talk
covered?
about working in the temple.
Okay.
That was probably the best thing I ever did.
Uh-huh.
Most enjoyable. And I was pretty green. I hadn't, when did I get my endowments? I don't remember. It was off before my mission, but
Yeah, it's probably just
I
before
haven't
your
been able
missions.
to attend the temple a lot before I started working there. But working with people in the temple is different than any place else in the world, because they're all on their very best behavior at all times. And the people that come are on their very best behavior. So, and you learn a lot. You learn a lot from the people you work with, and the opportunities you have to participate in the different ordinances. And it's just a special time.
And you're still working there?
No, I got my 25 years in and gave it up. Found out I couldn't sit on a post and stay awake.
And the standing part was probably the hardest.
Yeah, standing is hard.
That's great. Well, you've been a great example to all of us. I mean, you are a great example to all of us. You raised wonderful children, made changes in your life when changes were necessary, but thank you.
It's been a great trip.
One of the best things Mom does is have good family parties for Thanksgiving and the 4th of July and up in Fish Lake. All these family get-togethers that the kids love. Kept the family strong and together, and the kids, the grandkids all love their second cousins and have a great time together.
And
Well,
she's a good cook.
Well, I've kind of given that up.
Except maybe rolls and pies.
I found
Thanksgiving.
out you can survive without cooking.
What do you hope to accomplish for the rest of your life? You got anything that's not done that you want us? You're
When
still
you
trying
get
to
to
get
this
done?
age, you just endure. Endure. I'm not
The
looking
golden
for
years.
any new projects to.
I think it's.
She does tons of indexing.
Oh, good.
Still-
This is the big weekend for indexing.
Yeah, still goes to the temple on her own, even though she's not working.
Well,
Plays bridge.
and say how often. How often do you play bridge?
Just every Tuesday and the second Wednesday and the third Thursday.
My mother would say, I wish I was smart like LuJeanne. She's comes to bridge, she's better than all of them.
She's
Not
really
anymore.
good with numbers. When we play Scrabble with her, she always keeps score. Yeah, she can add those numbers in her head really well. Bob probably can too.
Well, I think that was evidenced by the fact that after you took the government service exam, they plucked you right back to Washington.
Well, they were desperate. One of the girls living with Virgie at the time worked at civil service, and she saw my test and she said, they'll never hire her.
The only thing on your resume was herding cows.
Well, tell us about your interest in sports and keeping fit.
Well, in high school we had a lot of sports. We played basketball and baseball, and I've always just liked sports, I guess.
And tell us about which sports you played through the years.
Well, when we were kids, we went swimming every day, and that wasn't just for, well, later on you could only stay for an hour, but when we first started going, you could stay as long as you wanted.
Was that at the natatorium?
Uh-huh.
That was unheated. It was,
Oh, it was warm enough.
It was actually a warm spring that fed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't that cold.
You didn't care anyway.
I didn't take up golf until after Jerry died. And,
at bowling.
oh yeah, we used to go bowling a lot, bowling leagues, and did a lot of fun trips bowling up to, let's see, we went to 2 or 3 different places now, I can't remember where, in Salt Lake, and I think we went down to Phoenix.
Yeah.
I can't-
And fishing.
Oh, we should talk about our fishing.
Let's talk about it. Give us some secrets.
When we first started going, we borrowed Boyd's boat, and the kids were, Katie and Elizabeth were little.
Brother Boyd's.
Brother Boyd's boat. And then, I can't remember when we got the trailer, but it was every weekend. You just automatically went to fishing, Fish Lake. And your folks and my folks would come up for dinner up there. And later on, when Ramsey was there, he liked to come up, but he wouldn't go on the boat with us. He'd just play on the dock, play in the boathouse. He got tired of that, staying out on the lake all day.
With the pop gear, trolling for those big fish.
Big Mac.
My problem was that you had to start so early in the morning. It was cold.
Well, we didn't mind that.
They had their warm overalls, rain gear. I remember spending a lot of time dragging a line.
Yeah, you did.
Well, you better tell about your hole-in-one.
Oh, I don't know. I borrowed a leased driver, and on hole number 5, I hit it with that driver and up to look for the ball, and it was in the hole. A good thing Vanna was there and a worker right close by, or I wouldn't have had any witnesses that I had a hole-in-one.
Gosh, what kind of driver does Lee have? We might have to look
I'm
into
still
it.
using it. I bought it from him. And
Wouldn't give it back.
he went and got another one.
I might have to get one like that.
And your big fish.
Oh, we caught that when we were deer hunting, and it was about noon, I think. We're out fishing, and we hunted deer on the way up and on the way home. Time we came home, it was dark, and there was nobody home to show it to.
Oh, shoot.
25-pound Mac. It was humongous, but it was a fun day.
It was a great day.
Well, I think the picture was still hanging at the lodge. Except did they tear the lodge down now?
No.
Oh, okay. It looks like our time is gone.
Well, thank you.
So, yes, thank you, Mom.
It hasn't been as hard as I thought it would be, but I probably want to do it all over again.
Well,
Just do different questions next time. So thank you, Brad. Thanks, Bob. That was a lot of fun.
Well, it's over.
Okay, goodbye for now.